Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Nick and Joe Show. We have a full house tonight. Joseph is with us down there in Ottawa, the nation's capital, and I'm up here in the middle of God's country. And believe me, we're not a lot far from God's country up here because, well, let's face it, it's all God's country. Anyway, but we're in the very middle of it up here in Sioux Lookout. It's a pleasure to have my host with me, my co-host with me. He's been busy thumping away in the campaign trail, knocking on doors till his knuckles bleed, and putting up signs all over the neighborhood, making it a family affair. I posted a picture today on my Facebook page of Joseph and his granddaughter holding up a sign that says, "Vote for Joseph Benamy." And I thought, that's a really cute picture. I mean, I don't like kids getting involved in politics, but this is something that nobody's going to object to. I mean, she's just holding up a sign, right?
Well, she's not
Anyway.
even that. She's posing before. There's actually a cute story behind that. So I happened to be out early one Sunday morning delivering lawn signs to some people who had asked for them, and so I was in this one small neighborhood, and as I was driving out, I thought, well, I should put a lawn sign on the corner. It's off of Highway 16, which you'll know where that is, Nick. Old Highway 16, Prince of Wales Drive, and so anyway, so I put this sign up, and then later on in the week, my son and his wife were over with the kids, and they said, "Oh, we saw you on Sunday morning." I said, "Where did you see me on Sunday morning?" They said, "Well, we saw you in this little development area, right?" And I said, "Well, what were you doing there?" And they said, "Well, because my son's in-laws just moved in, so they happened to be there when I put the sign up, and I didn't realize it, and so she just ran out and posed in front of the sign. So that was it.
That's where that came from. Yeah.
That's the story
Okay.
behind that particular what am I sign lawn sign.
Yes.
That's it.
Okay. Kirk, I will bite. You asked the question, guess where I am? That means you're probably not in Newfoundland, where you normally reside, which is one of the most beautiful places in Canada, by the way. I love Newfoundland. And I should also mention that if you want to join us tonight on the show, 613-413-2217. That's 613-413-2217. Now, every time I say that, John pays me a loony. Although I haven't seen any checks yet. No EMT transfers either.
Call or text.
Call or text. That's right. You can even join us if you want to. If you want to join us on the air, you can do that. We'll bring your call on, and you can even do it via video, so we can actually see who we're talking to. And that only lasts for as long as the call lasts. It's not like you got to sit in the studio and watch the show while everybody watches you. No, just when you're on the call. Just when you're on the call, and when the call's over, you can go back to anonymity or obscurity, if you will. You can do at blastradio.com. You can join the video chat there. There's an icon there. I'm just trying to make sure I get all my housework done before we get into the show. Now, Joseph, you missed a real event last week. We had a call all the way from Alabama.
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 Now I'm feeling terrible that I missed that. Seriously.
You did, because he was a great call. Real smart guy. He was only in his early 20s, and we asked him how he found us, and he said, "Well, I just go online and I listen to podcasts, and if they take calls, I call them and I ask them some tough questions, and I answer it right.
Good
Then I promote those shows to my friends whenever I see them, and if they fail, I just ignore them and move on." So, you're still in Newfoundland. Okay, sorry to hear about that, Kirk. Our condolences for the passing of your father. Anyway, so it was a great call, and we'll take calls like that all day long. We'll take calls however you want to make them. But one of the things I wanted to lead off with, I don't know, Joseph, I've probably beat this horse before. 17, really? I thought he was older than that. Okay. Anyway, so if he's listening, I forget what his name was. I think it might have been Bruce or something like that. Anyhow, I'm getting fed up with Yangmeet Singh standing in the House of Commons, railing away at the Liberal government that his party supports. He's talking about one of his pet peeves that he's put out in Twitterverse is this idea that people who run these large grocery stores like Sobeys and Loblaws and the Fresh Marts and things like that, these large chains, they're making billions. They're making billions. Do you know what the profit margin is in an average grocery store? It's 2%. 2%. That's the difference between what it costs them to buy the product and how much they mark it up for you to buy it off the shelf. 2%.
Yeah,
Well, how is it?
it's
What this really says, as I understand it, is that when you can make billions of dollars providing a product and or service that the population not only wants but needs, like we all need food, with a 2% profit margin and still make billions of dollars, you're doing something right and should be congratulated, not tromped on as being called greedy.
Yeah. Well, Nick, the first of all, this is just another indication of how little these guys know about basic economics. And I'm not even, maybe I shouldn't even say basic economics. It's just basic math. I mean, the fact is that groceries, especially when you're a large grocery store chain, is a volume business.
That's
So,
right.
when you're making literally pennies of profit on $10 and $15 items, that's not a lot of money until you look at the volume you're doing. But
Right.
you could cut the profit in half. In fact, you could, in many of these instances, you could eliminate the profit altogether on each unit. Eliminate the profit that each consumer pays when they shop at a grocery store, and it's not going to make very much difference to the consumer. It makes a difference to the bottom line of the corporation. But
That's right.
remember, these are largely public corporations as well. So it's the corporation is making money, but it's making money for its shareholders. And who are its shareholders? Well, this is not the 1920s where it was the robber barons, okay, or the late 1800s.
Right.
The shareholders of these corporations are people like you and me, and millions of other Canadians out there who have retirement funds, RRSPs, mutual funds, pension
Canadian.
funds. I mean, in fact, Mr. Singh himself, who qualifies for a parliamentary pension now that he's been there for enough years. So when he retires, he'll qualify for a pension. But where do you think that pension is? It's invested in these big bad corporations. So that's really the first thing, and it's just another indication of how they fundamentally don't get it. And I have to tell you, it's a point of curiosity with me, Nick. It really is. Well, it's also hypocritical, and I'll get to that in a second. But I just don't understand their lack of understanding, and it gets to the point where you think to yourself, it's got to be on purpose. Like they've got to know better, but they're just trying to foment, trouble. And you ask yourself, my goodness gracious, why isn't Twitter censoring these guys for wrong information? But here's where the hypocrisy kicks in. The same principle that they're complaining about with corporations, okay, that I've just outlined, that the corporation itself may make a lot of money, but that only represents a very small amount to the individual consumer. That's the same game that these guys play when it comes to paying for programs. A program that we may not agree with, okay, and it may cost $1 million, it may cost $100 million, it may cost $1 billion.
That's right.
But when you divide the share of that cost amongst individual taxpayers, it turns out that it doesn't come to very much. And so that's the game that gets played when it comes to increasing the size of government and piling program onto program onto program is that in fact it's the cost to the taxpayer is it only increases incrementally as as the size of government increases. So trimming 10% off of the size of government, well, that might be considerable, but when you say, well, we're going to eliminate this program or we're going to eliminate that program, it doesn't really make that much of a difference to individual taxpayers because there are so many taxpayers out there. So when you
Right.
spread the cost out, when you spread the cost of programming out, then it's easy to really to hoodwink taxpayers. And when you spread the actual profit margin out amongst consumers for when they buy from large corporations, it really makes very little difference to them. So, it's all smoke and mirrors. And I guess what just really burns me up, and I know you get burned about this stuff as well, Nick, but I guess what really burns me up is the low character that it betrays of the people who are constantly beating this drum. I guess I could forgive the younger people out there who are, recent graduates of our education system who don't understand that 100% plus 100% equals 100%.
100%. That's right.
Okay. And I know there are some listeners out there going, "What? No way!" But of course, that's they don't. There are too many people out there that don't understand basic math, and I could forgive them. Okay, I get it. What I can't forgive are people who are supposed to be educated, older, wiser, more experienced, more knowledgeable, continuing to foment this culture of envy, and they're nursing this victimhood for cheap political gain. And I just don't know how you sustain a great country and a great society when these are the predominant characteristics of that society.
Well, I think what bothers me about this, first of all, the hypocrisy. Number one, as you alluded to, he makes $185,000 a year himself, so this does not impact him, right? Yeah, he makes 100% profit on his work. Loblaws makes two, and which one serves the greater good, if I can use that phrase? Some airhead MP standing up in the House of Commons making hypocritical comments about how terrible the government is, even though he's busy supporting the very government he's trashing. I mean, just
Yeah, that's
that
true as
alone.
well.
Yeah, that alone makes me nuts. I mean, if you really believed what you said, you'd vote with the conservatives, bring these people down, and send us to the polls and let people decide for themselves which policy they want to follow, one to the left or one to the right, because that's really the only two angles you can take here.
Or
So,
or or remember, this is Canada. One to the left and one to the extreme left.
yeah, well, believe me, they have that in the States too.
All right.
Just
I can hear my conservative friends just, oh, there you go. Now they're never going to vote for me.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, the point I'm making is that this is part of what galls me is this guy not only is a world class hypocrite. Um, yeah, yeah, Murray, you're right, but you can't fix stupid, but it doesn't mean you can't give it a slap once in a while. Okay,
Murray,
yeah,
did
that's
you?
the
I
point.
have to ask, Murray, did you come up with that all by yourself?
He should. If he didn't, I'd claim it
It's very
anyway.
clever. I have to don't be offended. That's very clever. I'll have to use
That's
that one.
Yeah, please, by all means. Anyway, excuse me. So the point is that these people, it's like, look, you know what? I think that Yang Singh is not an idiot. You don't get to be the leader of a major party in a Western democracy by being an idiot. I think he actually believes this stuff. Um, I think that what happens is he spouts it just for window dressing, because in behind the scenes he's made a deal with Trudeau, and Trudeau's basically told him, look, I don't care what you say in the House of Commons, doesn't matter to me, just be there when we need you.
Right.
And he went, okay. And that's
Yeah.
where the stupid comes in.
I haven't looked at the national polling recently, but my sense is that all of this grandstanding in the House of Commons isn't hurting the Liberals and it's not helping the NDP. So it's have at it. What I find the most disturbing and even tragic, Nick, is the fact that he's people are looking to him for leadership within that certain class of voters, if I could use that term, uh, and uh, and and they're being deceived. So many young people out there are being taught this culture. They're being raised in this culture of envy, and in the end, that just can't end. In the end, it
Soon
can't
enough.
end well. Um, I'm not being very articulate, but you know where I'm coming from with this. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible way to raise kids and to cultivate this, as I say, this culture of envy and jealousy. Um, why? Because in the real world, there are going to be people who always going to be people who are worse off than you, and there are always going to be people who are better off than you.
That's right.
And you, you have to make your own way in the world, and nobody's going to make your way for you. If you're lucky, you'll have people give you a helping hand from time to time, but in the end, you have to be responsible for yourself, and you can't constantly be blaming people for things not working out for you. And that doesn't mean that sometimes it's going to happen that people are going to do things that might hold you back or whatever. And it doesn't mean that there's sometimes you're going to be treated unjustly and unfairly. But when that happens, you pick yourself up and you push back and you do the job you have to do. But in the final analysis, as I say, Nick, there are always going to be people better off than you. There are going to be people way better off than you. Unless you're an Elon Musk or somebody like that, or a Bill Gates, the fact is, people are going to be better off than you are. So get used to it and stop being jealous. Okay, you can
There's
have a
class
great
envy.
life.
This
Thank
class envy
just
just
thank your
makes me
lucky
crazy.
stars. Just thank your lucky stars that you were born in Canada and not in Haiti.
You know something? This is part of what another thing that drives me crazy is this continuous attack on those who are successful. In every town, there are people who have been successful and they're the heart of the community. Sioux Lookout has them, Killaloe had them, Ottawa's got them. All these different groups, the backbone of the community, and most of them. I can't speak for all of them. I'm not one of them, but and not for want, not that I don't want to be. I just don't have that kind of economic influence. But the bottom line is, let's. I think I mentioned it before. There's a contractor here in Sioux Lookout. He's probably 70 years old, runs a contracting company, and he's the kind of guy who, if he's sitting in the backhoe digging a hole and there's nobody around to swing a shovel to clean up in the bottom of the hole, he'll jump out and get in there and do it. He doesn't worry about it. He's a very hardworking man, very successful, and we should applaud that, not attack it. Not saying you got there by stepping on all kinds of other people. That's so much garbage. That's class envy. That's nothing but you're mad that he has $1 more than you do, when in fact, he's the reason you have a job in the first place. I went over this about a week or two ago about the idea of a multi-million-dollar yacht and how that is how the economy works. When somebody buys $1 million yacht, they have a
Right.
contracting they contract with naval architects who design the thing. Then there's all the people who spin off from that to build it, as crew it and fuel it and operate it and all that stuff. And all of that spawns all kinds of economic activity we wouldn't never see if we didn't have somebody buying the luxury yacht. So
Yeah.
the NDP, they not only I think they know that, but they don't like that. They really believe that we all should be equally miserable instead of unequally happy. I just
Well, I'm no I'm not a great admirer of Bill Gates, but I constantly use him as an example. Bill Gates may be worth billions of dollars, but I guarantee you he doesn't have a bank account somewhere in the Cayman Islands with billions of dollars sitting in it. That billions of dollars is in the value of the assets that he holds. Okay, and what do I mean by that? What I mean is that if you own a factory, okay, well, the value of the property, the value of the building, the value of the machinery, all of that adds up, okay, and goes into your net worth.
Right.
And that's where the guys that are billionaires aren't sitting on that kind of money. They're largely that's just the value of the assets that they hold,
Right.
assets that so many thousands of people are using to for their own employment. And
It's
so,
called being
okay,
cash.
it's
It's called
absolutely
being
true. Bill Gates has lots and lots of money at his disposal, okay?
right.
But the fact that Bill Gates has lots of money at his disposal, he didn't steal it from me, and he didn't steal it from you.
No, and it's called being asset rich and cash. And a lot of people are asset rich and cash poor.
That's
They don't
true.
have a lot of liquid cash, but they have a lot of assets, as you
The
were
other
pointing
thing,
out. Just
the
before you
other
go on,
thing on this,
I
go
want to
ahead.
say hello to Mindy. I think she's a first time commenter at least. I don't know if she's listened before. This country is built by men in denim, yet men in suits are destroying it. You know what? That's a great saying. There's a bumper sticker
Oh,
for you, Kathy, or Mindy, if you want to print out a bumper sticker and stick that on your truck. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Murray says we've all had to step in and be leaders because no one is going to do it for you. No time better in history for men to grow a set and stand with the women fighting for the children and grandchildren. Murray, you're right on. Appreciate that. Really? Yang Mi Sin is worth over 5 million, if not more. If he hates the rich, he should give up his fortune. Well, he certainly seems to hate the rich because he's always after them. I guess it's the
well,
rich except for me, right?
okay. So this is a good time for me to say, we have this crazy plan here in Ottawa to spend $60 billion to
Yeah.
stop climate change. And part of that plan, of course, is to ban the use of fossil fuel in Ottawa over a period of time, which means converting buildings, housing, etc., from natural gas or oil heat
To electric.
to electric heat. Okay, so so and over the courses, again, for our listeners and viewers, I'm running in an election here in Ottawa, and over the course of the last 2 months, we've had a number of debates, etc. And one of the things that come up, of course, is these guys who all support the plan. By the way, nobody supports the plan anymore. Just just when we started this 2 months ago, everyone was calling me a climate change denier. And now everybody's going, well, we have to fight climate change, but this plan is silly. So
You're making
win or
progress.
lose, we've had some influence, I think, over the character of the debate. But um, getting back to what I was saying, Nick, these guys all say that we have to show leadership and we have to all do our part. When I point out that we have a federal government that has a whole department dedicated to fighting climate change, and they have a plan, and we're all participating in that plan, whether we like it or not, whether we agree with it or not, and the government is telling us it's going to succeed. So okay, we go along with the plan, and then these guys come along and say, but we all have to do our part. Okay, but all of these guys are driving gasoline powered cars. Their houses are heated by natural gas. And I'll bet you that if you went to check their backyards, they'd all have gas or fired or propane fired barbecues. So my question is, if you really believe that we all have to do our part, then what's stopping you from doing your part?
That's a good
And
question. Now,
this goes back to what you're saying about Yagmin Sinha. If in fact it's he's worth $5 million, and that's the thing is, right, it's all very nice to talk about holding the working man down, but with assets of $5 million yourself, aren't you one of those people holding the working man back? So
it certainly looks that way to me,
yeah,
if you
well,
believe
and
it
of
or
course
not.
I wouldn't accuse him of that because I don't believe he is. I'm just thinking he's being a little bit hypocritical. And that's the thing about these guys, right? They always talk about we've all got to do our part. We've all got to share. and things like that. But in the end, they don't do their part. And
You know,
just the final point, Nick. As with you, I know a thing or two about leadership, and good leaders always lead by example. They
that's
always
right.
put the welfare of the people that they're leading before their welfare. And these guys are not leaders; they're showboaters. And in my experience, showboaters make the worst possible leaders.
One of the things this reminds me of with this idea about do as I say, not as I do. Um, if you look back in down south of the border, when the governor of Texas and Arizona and what was the other one? 2 or 3 states down in the southern border states down there. Maybe I don't know about New Mexico, but certainly Texas and Arizona were busing people up to Martha's Vineyard. I believe that was Florida. That was the other one, Florida.
Flying them. They were flying them
Yeah,
up to
flying
Martha's.
them into Martha's Vineyard, where it was supposed to be a sanctuary area, and we welcome everybody, but don't really show up. Because what do they do within 48 hours? They had them on a military base out of Martha's Vineyard. We can't handle all this, but you expect the people down south to. So this is another example of where talk is cheap, right? You can say whatever you want to, but don't actually expect me to live up to the very standard I want you to live up to.
Although I have to correct you on one thing, Nick, okay?
What's that?
When it comes to some of these guys, talk is very expensive.
Okay. Yes. It depends on who it is, but you're right. I was speaking in the more royal, but if they're in positions of power and they're spending your money, it can get really expensive really fast. That part I get.
Yeah.
Now there was something else I wanted to mention before the break. Okay, I can't remember. So we'll take a break now, John. That's a hint. We're gonna go to a break, and
we're gonna go to an early break.
Not according to my clock. We're right on.
No. Don't look at the clock. Look at the clock on the computer, on the Nick and Joe show.
I don't see
live
it.
Up in the upper left-hand corner. This is us being professional broadcasters.
Yeah. Where is it? I don't know. Anyway, but I'm seeing some new faces like Mindy. I think that's the first time I've seen a comment from her. Elias from Nasrallah. I think he is the one who told us that how much Jiang meat is worth. So there's been a few new faces in the crowd tonight. That's great. Always want to encourage people to join us and take part in the conversation. The number to do that, by the way, is 613-413-2217. I am working on making enough money off this to get a week's worth of free coffee from Tim Hortons. 613-413-2217. All right. With that said, we will take that break. And when we get back, Joseph and I will have plenty more to share with you. You stay right there. We'll be right back after this on the Nick and Joe Show.
We all know that climate change is real. But with countries like China and India failing to do their part, what Canadians need now more than ever is a Made in Canada climate change plan. A real plan that responds to the real-world needs of Canadians. A balanced plan that supports responsible economic growth and strengthens our essential infrastructure. A responsible plan that protects our natural environment and ensures that all Canadians enjoy the blessings of clean air, clean land, and clean water for generations to come. It's time for Canadian politicians to show real leadership in the world, putting partisanship and ideology aside. It's time for a sensible climate plan. We're the International Climate Science Coalition Canada, and we're ready to help. To learn more, visit our website, icsc-canada.com.
Okay, I just did a quick welcome back, everybody, or at least thanks for staying with us. And if you're new to the show, you can reach us at 613-413-2217, 613-413-2217, or you can text us at the same number, or you can go to Blast the Radio, blastradio.com, and Commerce CA.
BT Radio, BTradio.com.
Okay. I can't seem to do it on BTR. Okay. Finally found out how to comment. Well, Mark, I'm glad you joined us. Thank you for persevering. I just did a quick Google search over the break to find out what the NDP
BTR Radio. Hang on. BTR Radio. Not
dot
BT
com.
Radio.
It is
BTRradio.com. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, guys.
I did a quick Google search to figure out where the Liberals, where the NDP have the greatest support and amongst which demographics. So let me blow this up a little bit because I'm an old man. I don't see too good. There we are. Okay. According to this, Yang Mi Singh's New Democratic Party, and this isn't numbers. I wanted just on him, but this is what came up. Overall across the country, there's 17%. So they're in double digits, but they're certainly not going to form the government anytime soon.
Or possibly ever.
Yeah, well, let's hope that that's the truth. Their lowest numbers are in Quebec with 12%. Their highest numbers are in BC at 36%. And in demographically, the 18 to 34 crowd gives them 34%. 55 plus is down to 16%. So people who have had a little life experience, they don't support them. And even then, urban is only 22%, suburban is 22%, and rural is even lower at 19%. So farmers and older folks understand where we stand when it comes to support for the NDP. So they're not going anywhere. They're not going to, again, it's like one of the beauties of being in the NDP party is you can promise whatever you want. You don't have to worry about it because you're never going to have to fulfill those promises anyway.
Yeah.
Now, he's getting some traction by supporting the Liberals, and he'll say, so you want me to support you on this bill, huh? Well, here's what I want, because that's the only way he's going to get anywhere. But people with a little life experience or people who live an agrarian lifestyle realize that now this isn't going to work. So anyway, I just want to kind of conclude that segment with that particular topic. Now, I want to switch over to another topic. This is Danielle Smith, who was elected as Alberta's premier, not elected, as the leader of the United Conservative Party.
Or the UCP, that's it, yes.
Yeah, United Conservative Party in Alberta, and took over for Jason Kenney. So she hasn't stood in a general election yet. She is the leader of the government because he was the leader of the government at the time. But she came out, and one of the very first things she said was, and I'm paraphrasing, she's never seen a discriminatory situation as bad as for those who are unvaxxed, okay, in Canada in her lifetime. Now, she's not taking away from the other discrimination against other groups. She is saying that in my lifetime, this is the worst that I've ever seen it. And for that, now, help me out with this, Joseph, because you've had to deal with this kind of nonsense before. She was called a racist. She didn't mention anything about race. There was nothing to do with that. She was saying, because unvaxxed, there are people of every race. I can tell you without even looking, there are people from every race, creed, and color, okay, who are unvaxxed. So how does saying that make her a racist?
Well,
and
Nick,
what kind of nonsense do we have to put up with?
Well, Nick, when you think that 100% plus 100% equals 200%, then you're bound to think that everything that smells of discrimination is racist, and it's become almost synonymous, the two terms, and which is really unfortunate, because the truth is that discrimination and prejudice have very specific meanings, and we discriminate all the time. Do you like chocolate ice cream or do you like strawberry ice cream? Do you like Brussels sprouts? If you don't like Brussels sprouts, you're discriminating. You're in your choice of vegetable.
Right.
That's the meaning of the term. So the term discrimination, insofar as race is concerned, really means simply that we treat people differently based on race. Now, I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying that just because I think people have to be careful of the language that they're using, and it comes down to this. Okay, the people who are accusing Danielle Smith of being racist don't know her, and they frankly don't know the meaning of the term racism. Yeah, I just you can't apply the term racist to the the vaccination status of people, and so why are they saying that? Because that is the accusation of choice these days. It's the flavor that you get will get you the most mileage. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there that are just so afraid of being accused of being racist that they basically acquiesce in a lot of things that they probably wouldn't otherwise, simply by virtue of the fact that they don't want to have that tag
But she's one
applied
of them.
to them.
She did apologize, I think within 48 hours of making the comments. And I think I think she should have stood her ground and say, this has nothing to do with race. This has everything to do with discrimination based on people's choices.
Well, in fairness,
medical choices.
Yeah, in fairness, I'm not. I didn't see or hear. I didn't read or hear her original comments. So my question is, was she probably not so much apologizing as clarifying, but clarifying in a manner that appeared to be apologetic. I don't know. It's tough being in the public life these days. There's no question about that. Nick, I think we have a call from Richard.
Yep, we do. Hello, Richard. Hello, Richard. John, you need to unmute his mic. We'll get Richard on here in a second.
Okay, no problem. We'll let John figure it out, and we'll get back as soon as he does.
As soon as he's free, as soon as we get him, we'll go right to his call because we love phone calls.
So
I think Mindy makes a good point. The race card is played when people want to invoke feelings. It's all emotion. You're absolutely right. It's all emotional because, as Joseph points out, nobody wants to be called a racist. I don't. Joseph doesn't. You don't. Nobody does.
Although I'm just reaching a point in time in my life and my age and my career and that where I just don't care. I don't care. Call me what you want. I'm happy. I know I'm not a racist. I mean, I know it. I'm not racist. My family knows I'm not a racist. My friends know I'm not a racist. What do I care? Call me whatever you want. Sticks and stones.
All right. Joseph, are you there?
Yes, I am. I think you want to talk to Richard.
Richard, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Thank you so much. I was wondering, where's Kevin?
Kevin, you mean from last week from Alabama?
Well, is Kevin in Alabama on tour? Kevin, it's about time. Kevin, Nick, Joe.
Unless you mean Chris.
No, Chris is like basically who I am in reality. But no, I'm talking about Kevin. Kevin, Nick, and Joe. Everybody knows Kevin, Nick, and Joe.
Well,
okay.
I'm not.
Anybody
I'm
who
not sure.
hears Nick and Joe thinks, "Where's Kevin?" I know Kevin's not necessarily as famous as big as Nick and Joe. Nick and Joe are bigger. Obviously, you guys carry the name a little bit more, and you're more in the limelight. But still, don't. What about Kevin?
Okay, well, I'm not sure who you're.
I don't know, but I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what, Richard. I think that's going to be a famous question that we're going to be asking as long as this show is on the
Where's
air.
Kevin?
Should be asking
Where's
that.
Kevin
People,
tonight?
people, whenever they hear Nick and Joe, they think, "Where's Kevin?" I'm not the only one. I'm not the only Jonas head out here who's thinking.
I'm
to
wondering
myself,
no, Richard, seriously, I'm wondering where Kevin is too.
So am I. Okay, what can we do for you tonight? What's on your mind?
Well, I'm just a Jonas Brothers fan.
A Jonas Brothers fan. Okay. So, did you have something you wanted to discuss?
Wait a minute. Who are the
Well,
Jonas Brothers?
That's
That's a
who
band.
you are. You're Nick.
Oh,
and
Nick.
Joe
Wait a minute. Okay.
Kevin.
Nick, Joe, and Kevin are the Jonas Brothers.
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
what?
I was doing a joke. I was doing a joke. Oh, you've been pranked by the master, Prankzilla.
Oh my God, he got us. He got us. I was okay, Richard. I got to tip my hat to you. That was well played.
Boy, guys, I am so glad that I worked my tail off to get that phone call through to you.
Yeah. Richard,
all of a sudden you sound like John.
Well,
pranked again. We're being pranked again by
hi,
our own
I'm John. I'm
producer.
producing the show behind the scenes, and no, I'm also not a Jonas Brothers. Anyway, that was fun. Back to you.
No,
guys.
of course. That was all in good humor. No
whatever.
problem.
I couldn't figure out who Kevin was.
And you know what? I play the Jonas Brothers. I didn't know that.
Well, he got one over on us. Okay.
Good for you, Richard.
Richard. Yes, whoever you are. All right. Anyway, where were we? We were talking. I want to switch. We were bringing up a new topic, weren't we? Let me go to my.
Well, we were talking
topics.
about racism and
Oh yeah,
accusations of
racism. That's
racism
right. Yeah,
in Alberta and anywhere else for that matter. It's first of all, Nick, the accusation, of course, is not true, and I think we sort of brought Richard, Kevin, Steve, whatever his name was, on when I was sort of in the middle of saying that I just don't care anymore. I don't care. Call me what you want. It's not true, and you know I don't overreact to it. I don't. You know, it's not true, and that's the end of it. Some people get very upset by the accusation, but I just generally don't anymore. And I think that's just because of my age and having been in one form or another in public life for so long. You know, eventually you sort of get an alligator skin.
Yeah,
which is a funny saying because I've never actually checked an alligator's skin before, so I don't know how thick it really is. But I'm assuming that alligator skin is very thick because otherwise, where does the saying come from, right?
That's right. You better get an alligator skin. But you know something? What does bother me is people when they throw that allegation around, the temptation to say, "Look, I'm not because I have this guy's a friend and he's this, and I've got that guy's a friend and he's that," and almost you're defending yourself when you don't need to. You know, when people try to throw that tag at me, say, you know, say what you want. You know, obviously you don't know me because that's utter nonsense. And just let it go with that. And if they want to keep going, say, okay, fine, call me what you want. Let's get to the heart of the issue. Let's stop playing with name tags and talk about substance. And that's what bothers me about what's going on with Danielle. Like the Globe and Mail was after her. Every news outlet is after her, trying to crucify her under this racist banner when there's nothing about race involved in what she had to say at all. And if I was her, an advisor, I would say, don't step back, don't step down, explain what you meant, and say this has nothing to do with race. This has everything to do with a policy employed by our federal government and supported by the provincial and municipal governments that discriminated against a particular group of people made up of every demographic you can think of who chose differently than you wanted them to.
Right.
And that would have been, then try and make the racist case. Just bat it aside. Don't bother with it.
Yeah, well, as Margaret Thatcher used to say, I'm very happy when they start calling me names because it means that they've lost the argument.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Because I have no doubt Danielle Smith gained a lot of support over saying that because she was one of the few politicians that has the courage to actually say it.
Well, whether she gained support or not, is it true? And sometimes you have to be willing to speak the truth. It's a funny thing because the saying "speaking truth to power." Well,
That's
we
right.
tend to forget that in a democracy, it's the people and perhaps even the mob, if I went that far, that hold all of the power. It's politicians, but we can vote politicians out of power. So really, when you're talking speaking truth to power, yes, you want to speak truth as a small person or an individual to the government, to your elected officials. But from time to time, individual elected officials have to be prepared to speak truth to the population as well, and irrespective of what the consequences are. And sometimes those consequences can be quite horrendous. I mean, I've seen politicians hounded out of office because they dared to speak the truth. But that's the kind of person that you want to vote for, the kind of person who's going to say, yeah, I'm not going to pander, or I'm not going to give you that promise. I know it's what you want to hear, but I'm not going to do it because I just don't think it's right. And if you don't like it, vote for the other guy.
Yeah. That's that's so this whole thing about I really feel for her. She's stepped into a lion's den, and the lions are hungry and they're looking for blood,
I
mainly
guess, but
because
if she stays the course, Nick,
yeah,
and
she'll
she
be
just
fine.
stays firm, this will all blow over, and if it doesn't, it'll be an election issue, and it'll hurt her election chances, or it won't when the time comes. But those are the vicissitudes of political life.
Yes, I'm just reading some of the comments in the comment box. Now, for those of you who are new to the show, we read the comments. We don't always get a chance to comment on every comment. So if we don't comment on yours, it's nothing personal. It's just time and the flow of the conversation and so on. So don't feel like you're being ignored. That's not the case. It's just the fact that there's certain logistics that go into running a show that don't allow us to comment on every comment, but we certainly want you. And Richard interrupting, yes, that's right. But we certainly want you commenting so that other people in the comment section can comment back and forth. There's a whole culture, a subculture involved in our chat room. I just love it because sometimes it takes off and goes in a completely different direction than what Joseph and I are talking about. And we encourage that. One of the things I love about this particular show, and I think it's unique, is the fact that when people join the chat room, they're free to talk about whatever they want without having to worry about what they're saying. We don't come down with a hammer on somebody because most people who join our chat room are smart enough. They're not going to get involved in calling people names and that stuff. They want to discuss the issues, and they do so politely and respectfully. So I wanted to let you, for those of you who are new, don't be afraid to make comments. Just keep it civil, family friendly, that kind of stuff. Other than that, you can say what you want. We're not here as censors.
I like that term, by the way, Nick. Politely. It reminds me of George W. Bush's strategery.
Yeah. Well, I invent words all the time. You should see my kids when I say "Das ist Kerplunken." They have no idea. That's my broken German. It doesn't mean a thing. I use it in the term when it's broken. I call it Kerplunken. So anyway, whenever I see something like that and they go, Dad, that's not a word. It is now. I get to invent words. So das ist Kerplunken. There you go. So when something's broken, you can say it's Kerplunken.
Yeah, and I'm just circling back to Richard's call. And it, I have to say, I think that what he did was he paid us by using us to get his 30 seconds or 3 minutes of fame.
Fair enough.
I mean, it's I don't think that we're big enough that it ought to have been his first choice or even second or third choice. Maybe, who knows? Maybe we were his 10th choice.
I'm sorry.
Anyway,
No, kaput, that means dead. Kaput is dead. I'm laughing at Mindy's comment. She says shower equals the unstinkifier.
hold on. Say that again.
Oh my God. The unstinkifier.
Unstinkifier. Okay.
Yeah.
I got it. Yeah.
I've never seen that term before. Mindy, that was funny. You got me laughing over that one. This is what I love
Unstinkifier.
about our community, man. I'm telling you, it's a great place. Das Boot. Yeah, well, that's a submarine movie. One of the best ever made, by
Das
the way.
Boot. Well, that Das Boot means the boat.
That's right.
That's actually real German. As
Yeah,
is
that's
kaput,
real.
by the way. Kaput is also real German, but
That's
you know,
right. It means it's dead. Das ist kaput.
dead. Well, no, not
You're
dead.
finished. You're dead. You're
No, tot is dead. Kaput is
finished.
yeah.
Some words
Finished,
don't
done
translate
with.
well.
You know, toss it out.
Yeah,
It doesn't. I don't think it
das
has
ist
an
kaput.
actual perfect translation.
That's why I like my own word, kaplunken. You
Wasn't
walk over
that
to
a
a
game? Kerplunk was a game, wasn't it?
kerplunk, and that's where I got the idea. Tot, dead in German.
Tot, yeah, tot.
See, this is why we have John on the payroll, man. I'm telling you.
But he's
He
just repeating
saves-
what I just said.
Yeah, I know, but he did it official. Kaput is broken. Dot is dead. DOET.
Tot. T with a T.
Well, you
Tot.
can help us figure this out by calling 613-413-2217. 613-413-2217.
How did we get on this subject anyway?
I don't know. I mentioned something about Das ist Kerplunken. Like, hopefully that's Trudeau's career, Das ist Kerplunken.
Just got it into. Yeah, it's funny. It's I have to say this, Nick. Okay, so we're doing our pre-production discussion, which was really rushed tonight because I didn't log in here until like 15 minutes before the show or whatever. So so Nick starts off right away talking about how I've just had it. I just fed up with Jagmeet Singh, and I'm thinking to myself, man, if you're so fed up with him, why do we talk about him so much?
You know what? Here's why I brought that up, because if I was Pierre Poilievre or one of his advisors, I'd stop talking to Trudeau altogether. What's the point? You're never going to get an answer out of him. Anyway, he talks one word salad after another, talks in circles, never, always blaming Harper, even though he's been, 2015, 2014, Harper was gone. So, how many years is
already?
that? Yeah, 7 years.
We've had Prime Minister Trudeau for 7 years.
Terrifying. But
I
would tell him to go after Jagmeet Singh.
I don't know if I call it terrifying. It's been more comedic, but that's just me.
There's been a comedic element to it. It's kind of like the same comedic element you get when you plunge over the edge of a roller coaster and you're not sure how safe the thing is. That's the same comedic thrill you get if you want to go there.
Yeah, okay.
But if I was Poilievre, I'd go after Jagmeet Singh about his supporting of this government and hound him because he's the weak link in the chain. He's the one that needs to be voted off the island. Go after him and not let up and say, how come you keep supporting this government? It's clear this government's policies are causing all these problems, and you stand there day after day blasting that government while you support them. How come?
Well, we've talked about this before, Nick, and to me, it's just one of those curiosities about parliamentary life. But anyway, I don't know what else to say about it.
I think we have another phone call. Hello.
Hello, Nick.
How you doing? This sounds like our good friend from Montreal.
No.
Oh, who are we talking
Good.
to?
You forgot me already. You'll predict.
Oh, okay, Kirk. I'm sorry, Kirk. Kirk, there you are.
Yeah.
You sound like you had a bit of
not Kevin. This is not Kevin, right?
Nosebleed section for you guys.
Yes. We were too busy down in the bilges, buddy.
Yes, I know, and I had to do my rounds down there to keep you in check, make sure you had the measurements on that stick right.
That's right. Now, for those who don't know, Kirk and I sailed together on HMC Saguenay back in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
See, a former crew member we've kind of stayed in touch via the show, and it's always a pleasure to take Kirk's phone calls. So what's on your mind
Right
tonight?
on, buddy,
How's life in Newfoundland?
Newfoundland has its ups and downs, mostly downs. Around here, yeah.
Yeah. So what's on your mind?
Yeah. Yeah, like I said about my dad, right?
Yeah, sorry to hear about that.
Yeah. And you see, now, well, I guess I'm the executor because I'm the oldest. Falls on me to try to straighten out the paperwork and everything and all the claims he had through, like, say, with the Canadian Newfoundland government, but especially in the American government, right? Because he spent more than 11 years straight as a federal employee on the bases, especially in Goose Bay, Labrador, right?
Really?
Yeah.
So he gets a pension of the American government as well?
Yeah, he's entitled to it because he paid into it. He gets what they call he gets a service I can't even say it, annuity on a monthly basis, right?
Okay.
For the past 30 years.
Was he ever in Argentia?
Yes, he was.
Because, man, that. For those who don't know, Argentia is the single foggiest place in the world. They have more fog there.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, Dad was there. My great uncles were there. Both of my grandfathers worked there, and a great grandfather of mine also helped build the BLQ and whatever there. So a good many Newfoundlanders related to me were employed by the Americans.
Well, listen, man, a paycheck's a paycheck.
Yeah, and Dad was also in Fort Pepperell in St. John's. That's also a U.S. Air Force base at that time.
I don't think
so
they're not. They don't have it. Go ahead, Joseph.
You would all phased out now. See.
When are those leases up? Because those were,
I think they already are.
Those were leased to the Americans during the Second World War.
Yeah, they were phased out back in about 25 years ago, I think. Something like that.
So okay.
And sometime in the now some of the leases under the Lend-Lease Act was good for 99 years.
Right.
Okay.
But the Americans started phasing them out as early as mid 1960s with United States Air Force Base Harlem.
I think what happened is the technology kind of made them redundant.
Yeah.
Actually,
it was air freight and the Newfoundland government.
Just for the sake of our
Americans out.
Just for the sake of our listeners, if I just by way of explanation, when we were talking about the leases, so there were a number of United States Air Force and Navy bases and stations in different places around the world that the British government leased the land to or the base to the Americans as part of the trade-off for I think it was actually the original 50 destroyers that they got, and that was actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Kirk, that was just before the Lend-Lease. But it's going back to World War II. Just to show you how we still live in the shadow of that war.
Yeah, but the Lend-Lease Act in our history books included those 54 stackers that they were known back then because they were actually built during World War One.
Yeah, I knew that, but I wasn't sure if they were included in the Lend-Lease or not. But I guess they were.
Oh, yes, definitely.
That's what kicked off Lend-Lease.
Yeah, for base sites, and there's no less than 78 military installations that the U.S. government built here.
Really? I didn't think it was that high.
78?
That was,
wow.
Yeah, because it was no less than 78.
Wow.
Well, think about it from a logistical point of view. If you think about it from a logistical point of view, Newfoundland made a lot of sense, especially St. John's, because that's the closest harbor to England. So if you're taking a convoy across the ocean, you leave Halifax, you bounce off Newfoundland, and you go across the island. Go across the pond. That's the shortest route to
Yeah.
Western England, right? Where the Germans were doing everything they could to starve Britain out during World War II by their submarine tactics.
Yeah, their U-boats were all over the place too.
Yeah, there's a
Even
great book
down the
about
St.
the Battle.
Lawrence Seaway, they were there. You
I was
know,
just going
and
to
up
say
north
there's a
of them.
Battle of St. Lawrence. I think there's a great book about that. There were
Yeah,
several. The Caribou was lost there.
even in the northern tip of Labrador, there
Yep.
was a German base there during the war.
Yeah, they found a weather station. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
they put a weather station ashore. But the Battle of the St. Lawrence cost you guys the Caribou.
Yeah, that was one of them. It was one of
That was
many
one of
that
them. I
that
know there was
cost us.
more than that, but the Caribou was a ferry and was sunk
Yeah.
between Port aux Basques and Cape Breton Island.
So I'm just
Yeah.
looking at the time here, Nick. I think we have to go for a break. But
Oh, yeah.
Now, I also called about trying to get it, how hard it is for us to contact the U.S. Federal Department of the Operation of Personnel Management down in Washington, D.C. The toll-free line doesn't work here for some strange reason. It's like we're blocked.
Right. Yeah, toll-free American toll-free numbers generally don't work in Canada.
No.
You have to, you have to
who's
call.
your MP? Who's your MP?
McDonald.
I was going to say that might be your only option is go through your MP.
Yeah, go through the member of parliament. Might have to do that because I've tried 3 days straight in a row trying different numbers, even on my own loony or Tony, and still never got nowhere with it. All right,
Kurt, we do have to let you go. Thank you for the phone call and good luck with all of that. We certainly pass along our condolences for the loss of your father and call back anytime.
No, you would have loved his sense of humor, especially with the government. All he said, that crowd in St. John's, that crowd in St. John's.
There you go. All right. You have a good night.
Yeah, the only Democrat he liked was Kennedy. The rest of them he had no time for, not even for her own.
There you go. All right. You have a great night,
there, boys.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for calling, Kirk.
All right. With that, we'll take a break. We'll be back with more on the other side with the Nick and Joe Show right after this.
Who says you can't turn the clock back? Experience the excitement of open-air flying and see Canada's national capital region like you've never seen it before from the open cockpit of a vintage 1930s biplane. Are you up for the adventure? Put on your helmet and goggles and strap yourself in. Book your flight today. Go to OttawaBiplaneAdventures.com. That's OttawaBiplaneAdventures.com. Ottawa Biplane Adventures. The adventure begins here.
Oh my gosh, that was so exciting! I gotta do it again.
Welcome back to the Nick and Joe Show. And I'm not interested in Kevin. I'm interested in Nick. Where is Nick? Nick has not made it back yet. Anyway, we're in the second hour of the Nick and Joe Show for Wednesday. What is the date today? Just a second now. 16, 17, 18, 19th
of October.
It's the 19th, right?
Yes,
oh,
it
Nick,
is.
you're back. We were wondering where you and Kevin went to.
Oh, I was looking for Kevin.
Did you find him?
That'll be my answer now whenever I disappear from the screen.
Where's
I'm
Kevin?
looking for Kevin.
Yeah.
That was a funny call. Man, oh man, I was not looking for that one.
Oh dear.
And my wife brought me a great cup of tea. Thank you very much. All right. Now let me just dig this up over here. Okay. Oh, yes. We have had recently, and it's been becoming more and more prevalent, supply chain issues. Like right now, I'm involved in the auto parts industry, and we've been talking back and forth in the shop, so to speak, in the store, about things we can get and things we can't. And a lot of times there's inventory we'd like to have on the shelves, but we just can't get. And the reason why this matters is because if it's true of auto parts, it's true of pretty much everything else. Like there's a lot of stuff that should be on grocery store shelves that aren't. And you have to ask yourself, okay, where did all this come from? Well, this goes back to the idea that we've allowed our manufacturing to go overseas. Well, let's face it, it went to China. And so the first thing you have to say is, okay, let's bring it back. All right, that makes sense. But why did it leave in the first place? I mean, if you go back 10, 15 years when we used to make a lot more stuff here in Canada, maybe 20 years, we began to ramp up things like environmental regulations that are redundant, duplicitous. Like, let me just give you an example. If we're going to put a bridge over a river, how many times do we have to study how much impact bridge footings have on the bed of a river and how that impacts the fish population of that river? Well, we should know the answer to that by now. We've done about 4,000 studies. I mean, at some point, can't you say, look, here's what happens when you put a bridge across a river and move on? You don't need another study to do that. The problem is there's too much money in these studies for environmental assessment companies who go out and they write these reports. I can tell you are probably sitting in a file ready to just have a few blanks filled in, signed off, and sent in for $20, $30, $40, $50,000. Who knows how much, adding to the cost of the project. So there was that. Then you had unreasonable union demands. I remember one of the times GM went on strike before GM remade itself. Okay. And the demand of the union, because I've been in GM plants, I'm not picking on just GM. This is true of pretty much every car manufacturer across the board. When you go into a modern automotive plant, the thing is as clean as a whistle. There's all kinds of concessions made to workers. As far as I'll tell you one quick story. When I was still a truck driver, I pulled a truck and an empty trailer and backed it into a dock at the Tecumseh transmission plant. And I was supposed to have the racks removed, just empty racks, just take them off. I had to bring the trailer back to the yard. That's all I was there for. And it took me 45 minutes walking around this basically empty plant with nobody around, nothing going on, till I found this guy reading a paper with his feet up. And I told him what company I worked for, why I was there. And I said, I need those racks removed. He said, you have to wait for the next shift. I said, what do you mean wait for the next shift? It's only 2:00 in the afternoon. You're not done until at least 4. He said, I've unloaded my trailer in half today. I'm all done. I've met my quota. I said, okay, well, where's the forklift? I'll go do it. And he put his paper down. He put his feet flat on the floor. And he looked at me with all the seriousness in the world. And he said, if you set 1 foot on that forklift, I will call a wildcat strike. Everybody in this plant will walk out. Both of us. He didn't say both of us, but I thought that to myself. And your boss is going to have to choose between keeping you and losing the contract with GM or firing you and keeping the contract with GM. As far as I know, that trailer's still there. So when you add all those things together, is it any wonder when foreign countries said, look, come on over here. We got cheap labor. We don't have any environmental conditions to worry about. We'll give you tax-free status. You just bring your manufacturing over here, and you can do it all here and ship it by container back to the United States or Canada, back to North America. If you were running a company like a major manufacturer here in Canada or in the United States, you really have to shake your head and say, why am I staying here if they're making it so hard and so expensive when over there my costs drop through the floor? It might not be the right choice from a moral point of view, but from an economic point of view, it's the only choice on the table. So that's why they left. And now we have supply chain issues because there's a very good chance we're going to end up not only at war with Russia, but with China as well over Taiwan. And Taiwan, if they take Taiwan, then they've got a corner of 90% of the high quality microchip market. All of those are built in Taiwan. And if China takes it back, now they have control of not only of our manufacturing, but all the chips that control everything from tractors to garden lawnmowers. And we're really up against the wall, all because we weren't smart enough to look down the road and say, what's going to happen if we keep this up? Everybody got greedy. Everybody stuck their hand out and said, I want $36 an hour to put spark plugs in a V8 as it comes down the line. And the union said, stay with us, boys. We'll see how much less we can get you to do and how much more we can get you paid for not doing it. And the companies all said, bye-bye, we're done playing that game. And now we're paying the price.
Well, that of course is part of the picture, and I think, Nick, you're not wrong in many of the observations that you've made. I was just recalling some stuff, and I don't have the most up to date figures, but when I take, for instance, if I take Ontario for example, and I'm looking at some of the costs that are involved in doing business in Ontario. For some industries, the charge on top of labor costs for workers' compensation are in the 13 and 14% range. CPP contributions, you're looking at, and again, I don't have the most up to date accurate numbers, but I know a few years ago we were talking about 6%. Health tax, and before we start even getting into licensing fees and everything. So, the truth is that there are some industries in Ontario where just on labor, okay, just what manufacturers or what businesses pay as almost as a tax on labor, you're looking at somewhere close to 25% and as much as 30% in some industries. Now, when I say a tax on labor, what I mean is this. It means that if I'm paying you $20 an hour, okay, I pay you the $20 an hour. Now, I may have to deduct, I have to deduct what your share of pension, which your share of income tax, etc., that I remit to the government. But what a lot of workers, especially younger workers, don't understand or don't appreciate is that I'm also having to pay, on top of what I'm deducting from your pay, I also have to pay payroll taxes as well. Mm-hmm. So let's say, for instance, to make it really easy numbers, if I'm paying you $10 an hour, that actually may be costing me as much as $13.50 an hour. And of course, the more you pay in minimum, the more you raise minimum wage, the higher that goes, which is a kind of a scam actually for the government, because what you have to remember is that when the government raises minimum wage, the amount of money that it collects from the payroll taxes, which I stress is not the laborer, it's not the worker that pays those taxes. It's the employer that pays those taxes. We're not talking about the deductions that the employer takes from your paycheck and remits to the government on your behalf. Income tax, for instance, or your contribution to your pension, to public pension. We're talking about what the employer must pay the government in addition to what he or she is paying you, and it's a factor of what they're paying you. So the more they pay you, the more they have to pay in taxes. And that's really always, I thought, a terrible situation. So, and then you throw on top of that licensing fees, you throw on top of that extra regulatory fee or extra regulation, all of which impedes production, slows production, etc. So it's not a surprise that, you know, a lot of manufacturing ends up being done outside of Canada and outside of North America, and in fact, even outside of Western countries altogether. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Well, look, you know, I suppose people say, well, we want to have an information economy. Okay, that's great. But what about the people who, for whatever reason, just can't fit into, you know, computer sciences and all of this stuff? You want to have a service economy. Well, okay, but you know, so many services like working at McDonald's, which is an honorable job, but don't get me wrong, but that's an entry level job. Nobody expects to make a living wage flipping burgers at McDonald's. Okay, so all of these things contribute, and you know, if you're on the winning side of society, that is to say, you have a particular type of education, you have a particular type of job, and you fit in to the framework, then it's very good. It's a great life. You've got a great social safety net. You've got lots of things going for you. But if you fall through the cracks, and there are many cracks, and they're very wide in this country and throughout Western society, you really do fall through the cracks. And you know, maybe I'm going to sound like a raving left-wing socialist when I say this, but the social safety nets that we have don't really provide a whole lot of social of a net for a lot of people that end up falling through the cracks. Now, this is not me saying that the government has to step in and do all kinds of things for you. In fact, I would argue that in many cases, it's the government that creates these problems. It's when it comes to certain things, like take, for instance, a good example, Nick, is all of the talk about affordable housing.
Right.
Well, you know, the housing market is just as susceptible to market forces as anywhere else. But if you look at what we do now with housing, with the building codes, the requirements that we have, you know, I have to go back and just look at the details on this. But I recall a number of years ago, somebody had done a renovation in their house and they installed a new staircase, and the building inspectors came in and made them tear out the new staircase and replace it because the width of the steps was not according to code. So in other words, you had to have like 10-inch width steps, and I don't know if that's the right number. I'm using that as to illustrate the point. But this particular staircase only had, you know, I don't know, 8.5-inch wide steps, and you know, so and there's a great movie, if you ever get a chance that really brings this home marvelously. And I don't know if you've seen it, Nick. And the name of the movie is Still Mine. Still Mine. S-I-L-S. Still as in mine, M-I-N-E. Not, and we're not talking about a mine as in mining.
No, you're talking about somebody owns something.
And it's based on it's a true story. And it's actually based in Canada. It was a fellow who had a piece of land in New Brunswick, and he was a builder, and his wife is suffering from Alzheimer's. So he decides that it's time to move out of the big house with the stairs and all this stuff, and he wants to just build a simple cottage, 1 story, 1 bedroom, for he and his wife to retire to, and he can look after his wife who is suffering from Alzheimer's. And the regulatory hoops, the red tape, the bureaucracy that he had to jump through to get that place built. Okay, right down to when they came to inspect the frame of the house, telling him he had to tear the frame down and rebuild it because the 2x4s that he was using for studs didn't have the right stamp on them. Okay, and it just got to the point where, I mean, the guy was he was building his own house. He knew what he was doing. He's done this before. He's a builder, and he wants to look after his family, and that it's his property. And what they put him through, and it's as I said, the movie's called Still Mine, and he ended up at one point in time, because he was defying the inspectors. Actually, he spent time in jail for defying court orders that he had to follow certain things. It's mind-boggling how we've tied the hands of entrepreneurs, developers, builders, and frankly, just tradespeople in this part of the world, in this country. We're talking about this country, but it's not limited to this country.
You can call
And
it.
so what ends up happening is people, they move overseas. The capital goes overseas and into places where, you don't have the same kind of regulatory environment. And unfortunately, in many cases, we've seen that the regulations in some of those places are actually so poor that that people really suffer, and no fire code or anything like that. So there've been tremendous tragedies that have occurred as a consequence of that. And I think what people are looking for, they're not looking for doing away with regulations. They're just looking for some common sense in regulation, and some balance, some sense of proportion. I think that's all people are really looking for.
I can't agree with you more on those points when it comes to the government. And I'm reminded of Ronald Reagan's famous saying, the 7 most feared words in the English language.
The nine words.
9. Sorry, 9.
Okay.
Hi, I'm from the government. I'm here to help. Those are terrifying words because, let's face it, especially here in Canada most recently, the government isn't the solution, it's the problem. And it's like, I go back to when I owned the farm down in Eastern Ontario, down in Killaloe. I did pretty much what I wanted. I didn't care if the township didn't like it. I get stupid. I mean, I didn't put up buildings that were ready to fall down, the day I finished them, because I wanted them to last. I built them to a standard higher than what the standard of the building code was, for the very reason that it's my family and myself that are going to be using these things. I want them to be safe. And there's no room for that kind of logic in building codes and things like that. I don't have to go over with you the hours I spent talking about land grant patents and how to defend yourself against this kind of stuff.
Right.
There's no reason that he had to put up with that. The tragedy is Canadians are born and bred to be polite. And I've said this 1,000 times. When the lights come on behind us, we pull over and it's yes, officer, no, officer, whatever you want. When it's, you're on the ice, then it's yes, coach. When you're in the classroom, it's yes, teacher. It's, any figure of authority over us, we are trained to obey. Now that's beginning to change because the authority figures in a lot of cases are abusing their powers in unbelievable ways. Like they're even talking about bringing back the mask. If you don't get inoculated, we're going to slap you back into those face diapers. And when somebody asked on Twitter, are you going to wear it? Screw that. I didn't wear one the first time. I'm not wearing one now. I did when I absolutely have to, but that was it. And I think a lot of people are just going to say, sorry, we've been down that road. It didn't work then. It's certainly not going to work now. So I'm hoping that's the mentality, but people are beginning to realize they work for us, not the other way around. And the sooner we get that across to more people, the less often we're going to hear horror stories like the one you just related. because we don't have to bow down to everything that the government says. If the government passes a law, a nefarious law, an unjust law, and we just ignore it, they can't enforce it. The only reason they enforce, take speeding laws. Okay, if everybody's going down the 401 at 60 miles an hour or at 75 miles an hour and the speed limit is 60, and the cops catch 1 out of 1,000, most people just keep right on going. The law is meaningless, other than maybe you could call it a tax collection law. Because what are the cops doing now? They're issuing tickets and you got to pay the government. And so it's just a tax collector. They're acting as tax collectors. Because with modern cars, you can easily drive as safely at 60 as you can at 75. So anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole I don't want to go down. But the bottom line is Canadians need to reassert their fundamental rights and the fact they're free. And this is why what's going on with this investigation in Ottawa about the truckers' protest, there's been some real bombs dropped in that. Like what we've discovered so far out of that, and I had no intention of getting into that tonight, but it just seems to have wiggled its way into the conversation. The mayor and the chief of police admitted they had no idea what they were doing, but they wanted to support this idea that the truckers were terrible people and that they, we had to put a stop to them. So invoking the Emergency Measures Act was the only way they could do it, even though it was completely unjustified. Now, I don't expect any major changes because of this inquiry. I think it'll take a change of government before you see that. And so we'll have to wait and see. But this is when Canadians have to wake up and say, I do not need to bow down to the government. The government needs to bow down to me. I'm tired of being a lackey. I'm tired of being a puppet. And I don't like being manipulated. And it's about time Canadians pulled their big boy pants on and went and started to fight back in a political and at the ballot box. I'm not calling for any kind of physical violence, but just the idea of when you vote, keep in mind who imposed all this nonsense on you and vote accordingly.
And there we have it.
That's it in a nutshell.
What do you really have in that teacup, Nick? Oh, where did you get that cup?
This one?
Yeah.
This is my Sioux Lookout cup. We bought it when we moved up here. And it's a great cup. It's a little lighter. But it's nice.
They're great for sailing.
Yeah, you know why? Because they don't slide.
Yeah, because of the absolutely. That's I know. I've been looking around. I can't find them online or anything like that.
You're going sailing?
No. I just like the cup.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll send you one for a modest fee.
Modest. Yeah.
You know something? Speaking of sailing, I ran into some friends of mine that I sailed with way back when I first walked on board my first ship. Rick and Glenn. We had a chance to meet in Ottawa when I was down there for my son's wedding, and we had a wonderful time. And you know what's really nice about it? Is all the stories I love to tell, I didn't have to explain because they were part of it. If I talked about being on watch in the mids down in the boiler room cooking on the fuel pumps, that was all that thing I had to say. They knew what the fuel pumps were. They knew what that was like. They knew what they'd been there. And it was such a refreshing change. Not that I mind doing that, like when I'm telling people who are not sailors or stokers and worked in steam rooms or boiler rooms and engine rooms, explaining why, how this makes sense and why I'm telling you this. And, the fact that we lost a turbo blower chasing around some Russian ships and stuff like that, what that meant and how we rectified it. They already knew because they were there. So it was a lot of fun. So if you ever get a chance, if you want, for those listening, if you ever get a chance to get a hold of a veteran, somebody who's gone somewhere and done something, just ask them a few questions and the things you'll learn will blow your mind. Those people are amazing people. I was a very tiny part of a very big experience, and I certainly am proud of my part in it. And I know, Joseph, I'm speaking for you, but I have a feeling you feel the same way when you run into colleagues that you remember from your time on, I think you were on Skeena, those kinds of things. Anyway, I'm looking at the clock and I realize we are over time for a break. And heaven forbid we do that. So, John, cue it up because it's time to take a break. We will be right back with the last half hour of the show. Stick around. We got more straight ahead.
We all know that climate change is real. But with countries like China and India failing to do their part, what Canadians need now more than ever is a Made in Canada climate change plan. A real plan that responds to the real-world needs of Canadians. A balanced plan that supports responsible economic growth and strengthens our essential infrastructure. A responsible plan that protects our natural environment and ensures that all Canadians enjoy the blessings of clean air, clean land, and clean water for generations to come. It's time for Canadian politicians to show real leadership in the world, putting partisanship and ideology aside. It's time for a sensible climate plan. We're the International Climate Science Coalition Canada, and we're ready to help. To learn more, visit our website, icsc-canada.com.
Okay, welcome back to the Nick and Joe Show, folks. Now, I am delinquent in my duties. I did not give John an answer the call segment to play for you this evening, so I'm just going to take a couple of minutes and tell you what I remember of a story about a man named Raymond Collishaw. Now, Raymond Collishaw was a fighter pilot during World War I. Of course, he was Canadian, flying for the Royal Flying Corps, and because Canada didn't have an air force at that time. We didn't have our Air Force till 1927. Anyway, he was fighting. He was one of our top aces during World War I. At one point, he took on over 60 German fighters, landed at the wrong airfield, had his goggles smashed, his elbow broken, and took a round to the leg. But he managed to down about 5 or 6 different aircraft. And when he landed, he was trying to land. There he is, Raymond Collishaw. What a story. Anyway, he began to think he might not be at the right place when all these people in strange uniforms started running towards him with rifles in their hands. And he looked around and saw these black crosses on the butt ends of these airplanes on the rudders. Realized he was at a German airfield, not a British one. So he took off. And he managed to get back to the Allied side. He finished the war. Then he went on to fight for the White Russians. Now, so that you understand what being a White Russian, he's pretty good. He's almost as good looking as I am. Anyway, he was flying for a guy called General Denkin. Now, General Denkin was in command of the White Russians, who were the Tsarist troops. They were not the Bolsheviks. Those were the Red Russians. And the Red Russians were nasty. They had a bad habit of, if they caught a downed fighter pilot or a bomber pilot from the opposing side, they would literally crucify him like on a cross, just like in the Bible when Christ was crucified. Same thing. They would nail him to a cross. And that was, so you didn't want to get taken by the Russians. And there's other stories about, I could get into, but I'm not going to. I want to stay with Raymond. So he fought in 1919 for the White Russians, and his base was being overrun. Now, his base, in the overrunning, they packed all their aircraft. The one that in that picture there looks like it's a Sopwith Pup. But they took the wings off, stuffed them into train cars, and were pulling away as the Red Russians were overrunning the base. And Collishaw is hanging off the last car by the ladder. And he's got a 6-shooter in his hand. He's shooting at the Red Russians, while the Russians, the Bolsheviks, are shooting back at him. So obviously he escapes. So fast forward to in the 1920s. And what he does is he's flying for the Royal Flying Corps, putting together bases in Iraq because that was British territory at the time. And they had to find a way to resupply these bases with water because they're out in the middle of a desert. And he comes up with the idea of taking a inner tube from a Allied bomber aircraft called a Handley Page. It was one of the biggest bombers of World War One. One inner tube for its landing gear tire would hold 75 gallons of water. Now, a gallon of water weighs 10 pounds. So he's basically carrying 750 pounds. And he flies over the airfield and he drops it, thinking it'll just hit the ground and skid to a halt. Inertia doesn't work that way. It popped up on its side, and 750 pounds times, let's say, 50 or 60 miles an hour, rolling straight down the runway, crashes through the hangar, takes out a bunch of offices, goes through the back wall, and takes out 3 or 4 more airplanes. So that's not going to work. They find an old abandoned well. And what happens is they can't tell if there's any water in it. So he says, well, put me in the bucket. I'll take one of these Indiana Jones type torches and we'll go down there. You lower me down and I'll tell you if there's any water at the bottom of the well. So as they're lowering him down, he notices as it gets darker, the walls are starting to shimmer in the light from the torch. And he takes a closer look. It's covered with black scorpions. So he starts yanking on the rope. Pull me up, pull me up. So they pull him up out of the well. And now we'll fast forward to the 1940s. He's fighting World War II in Malta, the defense of Malta. He is a air vice marshal by then. And what his job is to work with the air defense forces, keeping mostly the Italian Air Force. The Germans were there too, but they were trying to bomb Malta off the map because Malta was the linchpin to supply convoys through the Mediterranean for Rommel and for the 8th Army, the British Army. So what he would do is he had a handful of Gloucester Gladiator biplanes from the 1930s, which are outdated the day the war started, and he had about 4 Hawker Hurricanes. And every night he'd take his Hurricanes and he'd move them to a different base. So the Italians, when they flew over on their recon flights, they would look down, take pictures, and there's 4 more Hawker Hurricanes. And they're thinking, oh my God, this guy's got hundreds of them. Well, he found a hangar filled with anti-personnel mines. So he takes a DC-3, you know, that iconic airplane that all you see the parachuters jumping out of on D-Day, that particular plane, and he stuffs it full of these landmines, and he takes the pilot and the co-pilot and a couple of crew members and sends them off over Italian airfields at night. And they open the back door and they sit there and they arm these anti-personnel mines. These are just small little mines designed to take your foot off. And they litter the runway and the surrounding area with these landmines. So before the Italians can take off and do anything, to go after Malta, they got to clear the runway and the surrounding area of all these unexploded ordnance laying on the ground. It was just, there's a DC-3 right there. That might be one of them. Oh, that's an American. Well, no, they use a star for Allied forces. Anyway, and that's a D-Day model because it's got the 3 white stripes on it. Anyway, the point is, that's how they finally said, okay, Raymond, you're done. You're coming home to England. And he fought from 1914 all the way to 1943. He never quit. And he was always in the middle, and he's an amazing character. And I'm just bouncing off the tip of his career. So if you want to do something, look up Raymond Collishaw and then go looking at other characters like him. And names I could give you as long as you want to sit there and listen. But I'll tell you what, he is a Canadian hero. He needs to be far more well-known than he is. And I'm telling you, this guy is the consummate Canadian warrior. So I'm very proud of him, and I'm very proud of his wartime efforts to keep this country free so that Trudeau could wreck it. Well, no, not quite. But anyway, Raymond Collishaw, another Canadian that answers the call. Or who answers the call. I get yelled at when I say that. I don't know why. Anyways, that's a great story. I thought I'd share it with you because I didn't do the thing I'm supposed to do and send John a copy of one of the Answer the Call features. So there you go.
I think that another Canadian that answers the call is grammatically correct or grammatically acceptable is probably the best way to phrase it.
Well, I
But
always thought
I
so.
could be wrong. I've been wrong about my grammar before.
I always thought so. That's why I titled it what I did. But more people, when I was playing them at terrestrial radio, my boss would come to me and say, "People love it, but drives them crazy when you say that answer the call." It was a great
Excuse me.
feature. I love doing it.
Yeah, I suppose it's better to say who answered the call.
Yeah, yeah. And there's guys like Max
So-
Bernays I could talk about, and there's guys like Smokey Smith I could talk about.
Yeah.
What's the last VC winner we awarded? And that still bugs me. We haven't handed out a VC since the end of World War II. Hampton Gray was the guy, the last VC winner, and he died in the act. The chances
Victoria
of surviving, Victoria Cross. What did I say?
VC. I'm just
VC.
clarifying.
Yes.
for
Okay.
listeners.
Oh, I thought I had it right. If you ever want to see a great series on how hard it is to win a VC, watch Jeremy Clarkson's series on that. He has like a bunch of 10-minute segments about a guy with the British who won the VC during Operation Market Garden. And there's a little twist at the end, so I don't want to ruin it for people. But it's a fascinating story and tells you what you have to do to win the Victoria Cross and why it is the world's premier medal for gallantry under fire. The Americans have their Medal of Honor, and I'm not taking anything away from that. The French have the Legion, what is it? The Croix de Guerre. The Italians, every country has their version, but nothing is as hard to win and survive winning as the Victoria Cross. You stand a 1 in 10 chance of surviving a VC winning event. And it's just, but I cannot believe that since 1945 and all the conflicts we've been involved in, Korea, peacekeeping, Afghanistan, that nobody has approached that bar and hasn't had. I know the British and the Australian have handed out a bunch of them in Afghanistan, and I'm just scratching my head going, what's the matter with us? What's the point of having an award you never give out?
Now, this is an interesting topic we're speaking about now because, of course, just this past week, the senior leadership of the Canadian military revealed that, unfortunately, we virtually don't have a military anymore. In other words, we've fallen way, way, way below recruitment level or recruitment targets. We don't have enough sailors to man all of our ships adequately. We don't have enough soldiers. We don't have enough Air Force personnel. And this is not just an equipment problem. It's an actual personnel problem that we're just not recruiting people. People are just not choosing to enlist in the military as a career.
I'm not surprised to hear that at all.
Yeah, and tell me what's your theory on that, Nick?
Okay, well, the reason why I think they're having a problem is because who wants to join a pansy organization? And I'm not putting down the people in the military, okay? My son's in the military. I have a lot of respect for the military overall, regardless of the branch. Set my naval bias aside. But when you come out and you say, look, man, come and join us. You can have hair as long as you want. It can be any color. If you want to wear high heels and a skirt, we don't care. Nobody's attracted to that. If I was running recruiting, I would be going after the best of the best. I would make it look like something difficult to achieve. To become a member of the Canadian military should be a rather elite group for people, to get involved. I would want them to be able to play with some of the world's best hardware, so that, say, not only are we going to train you right up here, so you're the world's best, but we're going to give you the best equipment. You're going to get, benefits packages. You're going to get all this stuff and make it something that's desirable, difficult to achieve. People will scramble over each other to reach something that they perceive as valuable far more than they ever will something that's just given away for free. I mean, you could take, if you had a brand new color TV in the days when you sell TVs or an LRT screen or whatever, and write free across it and stand there on the street corner, hundreds of people would pass you by and no one would ever take it. But put $599 on it and put it in a store, you can't sell them fast enough. Why? Because you're putting a value on it that people can perceive and identify with. So if I was running recruiting, I would do the same kind of mindset. Make it something not, and I don't, when I say make it look fun, I don't mean fun like a fair fun. Make it look challenging. Make it look interesting. Make it look dangerous. Kids are drawn to that kind of stuff. If you talk to an 18 to 24-year-old, they're immortal. They love the fact, they get to play with firearms. They get to drive around in 60-ton main battle tanks, and make them go boom. That stuff, that's the kind of stuff that draws people in and wants to be part of it. Put them in the seat of, one of the hottest fighters in the world. I think it should be the Gripen, but that's a different story. Put them on a brand new submarine, put them in a brand new ship and say, this is what you get to play with if you join this group. Not, if you want to wear heels and a purse.
So what you're essentially saying is that the problem is that our whole recruitment strategy is based on making things easier.
Yeah.
When really, if you want to attract more people, the way to do that is to make it more difficult.
Yes. Yes.
People love the rise to challenge.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that, Nick. I think that if you want more people to apply, it has to have a certain value above what it is right now, and that the decisions that are being made with respect to recruiting, in terms of making entering and staying and serving easier. And by easier, by the way, let me clarify that I'm not saying that you want to still have a decent quality of life,
right?
And so you want to have proper housing, you want to have a decent pay, you want to have proper benefits, you want to know that your loved ones are looked after as well, whether you're here at home with them or you're deployed somewhere. So in terms of those kinds of things, you want to find ways to make it easier on families and on recruits, on service.
No argument there.
Service women. But in terms of the actual job and the actual training and the professionalism, you don't want to make it easier. You want to make it harder. You want to make it something that people really look up to, that they aspire to. That they can rightly feel, and again, I don't mean to sound derogatory or anything like that, but that they can feel a greater sense of pride in having achieved things than perhaps that they're feeling now.
Absolutely.
When you join.
Look, think about the U.S. Marines. When I say U.S. Marines, what's the first thing that comes to mind? To me, it's a guy in a razor sharp outfit with that sword, and he's standing there with his sword straight up like this, and he looks like $1 million. Okay.
Sure. Well, honestly, the first thing that comes to my mind is a little ditty we used to sing.
Yeah, I know, but I wasn't going there.
No.
But my point is, the few, the proud, the Marines. Exactly. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great slogan.
Of course it is, and it works, and because the idea is, you want to be part of us, you better be willing to pay the price, because this is a club worth belonging to. And the Canadian military used to be that way. When you and I enlisted, I don't want to sound like an old fossil from 1921, but in this late 70s, early 80s, when we joined the military, basic training was 7 or 11 weeks long, I forget now, but it was long and it was hard. And when we came out,
13 weeks for me.
Yeah, it was 11 for me. So
13 weeks in Chilliwack.
Yeah, well, I was out in Cornwallis, and I spent a lot of time pushing Dixie.
I could never understand. I could never understand how it is that you joined the Navy and ended up spending 13 weeks climbing mountains in the Rockies.
Yeah, go figure, right? But the point is that if you could get through that, you felt like you'd accomplished something. I remember
Sure.
the day we were marching, and foot drill was one of the first things they hammered into you was good foot drill. We could march. Now that doesn't make you a soldier. That just means you can turn the same time as everybody else turns and march in step with everybody around you. Okay, it doesn't make you any good on the battlefield, but it does instill the kind of discipline required to be useful and to work in a battlefield environment. So we were marching down. We had our cam gear on. We had our helmets on. We went down to get our rifles. This is week 4. And they gave us each an FNC 1, and we had to memorize the serial number, 502410. I'll never forget that number as long as I live. That was the one on my rifle. And when we marched away, we were going down a little hill, and I was at the back of the platoon, and 30 guys all marching in step, carrying rifles with their helmets on. I thought, damn, we look like something. And I'll never forget that moment, because it's when I went from civilian to military. I had given up the things that made me a civilian and turned into somebody who was proud to be a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, as it was called in those days. And I think that's the kind of thing that we need. There's a certain esprit de corps. Every country has, or every society has within it, a warrior class where people are willing to do the rough work that most people aren't, so they can sleep soundly in their beds at night. That's a paraphrase of an old saying. But I think that if we go after that group, there'll be a lot of people who want to join that group along with it, because they see, when you see soldiers walking down the street in uniform and they look like $1 million, you go, wow, that guy looks cool. Maggie, you were I didn't know that, Cornwallis. That was quite a place, man. Oh, you didn't walk anywhere and you didn't waste time eating. You just dropped your head in your plate and inhaled. Anyway, but yeah, I think if I was the one running recruiting, I would take a completely different tack. I'd scrap all this nonsense. I'd throw out the old dress code. I go back to the short hair and and the hard. They still do a lot of. My son went through Saint Jean for basic training, and the physical element is still there. You still have a high degree of physical fitness that you have to have, but the rest of it, not so sure. So I'd go back a long way and change the way we do things, because I don't think. You ever watch a show called Bad Boys Army, where they took kids off the street and put them through 1950s British Army training?
I have. I think I saw an episode or 2 of that on YouTube. I don't know if that was the name of it, but the premise was that these are kids that were failing in school. They were dropouts. Some of them had gotten into trouble with the law, etc. And they were given the opportunity to go through, as you say, some basic training, yeah, no, I don't know if that's the name of it, but you can find some of these episodes on YouTube.
I think that's what it was, but the reason I identified with it was, first of all, the results you saw over their training. Like, these kids, some of them couldn't make it, but we had that too. We had people who couldn't make it through basic training, got released as unfit for military training, and got returned home. But what happens is, as you are presented with these different challenges, it's like building a wall, right? You lay the foundation, then you put the bricks up. And if you remember, in the beginning of the training, you were called every single name in the book. They didn't care. No political correctness around here. There were all kinds of names thrown around. And that was all to tear your civilian veneer off. And then you got about halfway through it. All of a sudden, they start calling you, okay, now you're starting to look good. They start to build you back up again. And by the time you hit graduation, man, you were the cat's meow. I couldn't tell you who our reviewing officer was, but he said, enjoy this time. You are in the best shape of your life. You can do things now you won't be able to do 20 years from now. And you are entering the Canadian Armed Forces as someone that we're looking forward to for leadership from you, as, going forward. So, Maggie, the outdoor showers, I don't remember those, Maggie. We had indoor showers, but a lot of guys would shower with the clothes on because it took too much time to take clothes off, wash them, because you only had 2 sets. Anyway, that's a whole different story. So, yeah, but if I was running recruiting, it wouldn't look like it looks today, and I would
Well,
like
I have to
Wonderful.
say, Nick, that there was no name calling in Chilliwack.
Sure, I believe you.
No, I'm dead serious.
Really?
Dead serious. Yeah, there
Now,
was
is
a
it because
certain
you were an
minimum
officer?
decorum. Okay.
Is
Well,
it because you're an officer candidate?
That must be it, Nick.
Because they call us everything, and I mean, if you think it, they used it,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
will.
Well,
Oh my God!
what can I say? Other ranks.
Yeah, I know. And if it wasn't for us, you wouldn't have a job, so I wasn't worried about it. Besides, we didn't pay too much attention to you guys up in the
Well,
wardroom.
I loved, something I really loved. I loved when people would accidentally salute someone, and the saying was, no, don't salute me. I work for a living.
Oh, I thought you said I had parents that were married. That was the one I heard all the time.
No. I work for a living, son.
That's right.
I thought that was a great saying. Of course,
Yeah.
it was a little insulting to officers, but I worked for a living
Hey, listen,
too.
until they wear that solid bar, as long as they got that skinny one, they're not officers. They're officer cadets. Anyway, yeah, we could sit and reminisce for hours. I want to ask Maggie though, what did you do? What was your trade? So, Maggie, if you want to go ahead and put that in the comments, I'm curious because I always, when somebody's been there about the same time I am, I'm very
and while we're
curious.
waiting for that answer, I don't know whether you noticed or not, John, but I did put into the comments section a link to a place where you can actually get the video for that movie I was referring to earlier, Still Mine.
Yeah, I saw it, but I can't post it to the public chat room. A medic. Boy, I'll tell you, those are handy to have. There it is. Okay,
There it
so
is.
there for those who want to watch the movie Joseph was talking about, called It Still Mine, or It's Still Mine, you can go to that link.
And you can go. They have a great trailer there too, give you a good taste of what that movie was all about and what he went through.
All right.
It was a horror show, but lots of people going through it.
All right. Well, you know what that means. We have done 2 hours, buddy. And there it is gone. So it's time for us to say goodnight. Thank you all for joining us, especially the new folks. We always love to see everybody in the chat room. It's always fun. Still Mine.
There it is.
I have to make a point of watching that. And let's hope that Joseph can join us next week if the campaign trail doesn't take him away. If not, we'll find a way to carry you through 2 more hours.
Monday's election day, so win or lose, I'll be here next week.
Then we could talk win or lose about what the experience was like.
Yeah, then I can really take off the politically correct gloves.
There, because it won't matter anymore.
That's right.
All right.
You're either stuck with me for 4 years or you're not.
One way or the other. We'll worry about that then. Good luck on election day, and for the rest of you, have a great night. Thank you for joining us. Spread the word, whether you like us or not. We will take all comers, and we'll see you all next week. In the meantime,
and we're going to try to find Kevin for next week.
We're going to continue the hunt for Kevin, I promise. Whether we find him or not, I wonder if he's around somewhere. Anyway,
that thought occurred to me, Nick.
I'm thinking. I'm ahead of you. I'm with you. All right. With that said, ubi caritas et amor, Deo CBS. Good evening. God bless. Don't let anything disturb your peace, and may you have a fair wind and a following sea.